Great. Thank you, Ariana, and thank you, Douglas. And thank you so much to all the wonderful speakers and to the attendees for showing up to hold space for this important and timely topic of grief. Thank you also to the tech team and volunteers that are working hard behind the scenes. Douglas spoke to the grief experienced by human rights defenders in Uganda. And for our next talk, we're moving closer to home here in the US to shed light on the grief being experienced by the Asian American community. Our speaker, Ivy Kwong, is a member of the Resilience Collective, and getting to know Ivy has been, for me, one of the unexpected gifts of the pandemic. Ivy is a first-generation Asian American psychotherapist, speaker, and author who specializes in healing codependency, intergenerational trauma, and Asian American mental health. I love that Ivy holds gracious space for a community that often carries a stigma against being able to openly discuss mental health. I've been in awe of her ability to speak eloquently to the many facets of being Asian American. As an Asian American myself, I'm so grateful to have the opportunity for Ivy to speak to some of our collective experience. Please give a warm welcome to Ivy as she helps make visible the invisibility of Asian American grief.
Thank you so much, Shane. I'm so grateful for you. I love you, and I'm grateful to be here with all of you. My name is Ivy Kwong. I've been a therapist for over 16 years, and I specialize in Asian American mental health and healing codependency. This talk is for everyone. I invite you to feel what you feel and take good and gentle care of yourself as you listen. All of you is welcome here. We're going to begin with the 5 trauma responses: fight, flight, freeze, fawn, and feign. All are instinctive ways we react in times of stress or perceived danger to try and stay alive. Fawning and feigning describe codependency. Fawning is being an extreme people pleaser. It's prioritizing the wishes, needs, and feelings of everyone else above your own and finding it hard to set boundaries and say no. It's based on the idea that you can earn belonging, safety, and love by being nice, good, selfless, and trying to please and placate others in order to avoid conflict or danger. Feigning involves shrinking. So pretending to feel less and to be less than you actually are, so you don't risk hurting or offending anyone or drawing negative attention to yourself. If someone can't see you, they can't hurt you. Stay silent, stay compliant, and stay invisible in order to stay safe. These lessons are passed down to us from those who learned them before us. Don't complain, or you might lose the little you have. Don't speak up, or you might be punished for it. Don't take up space because it belongs to others. Don't make trouble or ask for anything. You should be grateful for the crumbs that you get. What happens when this survival strategy stops working? When it becomes more harmful than helpful? What happens if you become so good at pleasing or hiding that you disappear completely? That your grief, your pain, and the harm being done to you and your community goes unnoticed and unheard? One of the most powerful and healing ways that we can process grief is by expressing it, sharing it, and having it witnessed by a caring, empathetic, and non-judgmental audience. If we remain erased from our society's awareness, we can't heal. There's been very little media coverage of Asian American grief. There's very little teaching in history classes of Asian American pain. And so it stays invisible, growing heavier with gaslighting, microaggressions, and racism, stemming from the lack of awareness, humanization, and any way for others to learn, develop awareness, empathy, and compassion. Holding everything alone results in physical illness, overwhelm, depression, anxiety, angry outbursts, and burnout. We are East Asian, South Asian, Southeast Asian, and Pacific Islanders. We are not a monolith. We're very different, yet we're being treated like one. We aren't all crazy rich Asians or bling empire Asians. Nearly 15% of us are currently unemployed. This is nearly double from before COVID. Over 12% of us live below the poverty line. We've been amongst the hardest hit by COVID, and over 1.7 million of us are currently undocumented and unprotected. We're not your model minority. This is a harmful term made up by white sociologists to drive a racial wedge between Blacks, Latinx, and Asians fighting together for equality during the civil rights movement in the 60s. The model minority myth claims if we are hardworking, and well-behaved, we might receive protection or preferential treatment from those in and keeping power. But the truth is more clear now than ever before that staying silent has never and will not keep us safe. Today, my intention is to make the invisible visible for the honoring and the healing of all of us. First, I offer a brief lesson of what none of us were taught that we need to know, because if we don't know our country's history, we can't learn from it, and we're doomed to keep repeating it. Knowledge is power, and awareness gives us choice, the choice and the chance to do things differently. Second, I'll share a very intimate and personal share on my own grief. Feeling nervous and vulnerable about it, but also hopeful and grateful. Third, for those wondering what to do, I share what can be done, what we can do on our own and with each other. And finally, I'll lead us in an ancient 7,000-year-old experiential somatic practice, embodiment practice for our collective healing. First, quick history lesson. Asian American racism, hate crimes, and discrimination are not new. How did we get here in the first place? In 1865, the Central Pacific Railroad imported over 20,000 Chinese workers as cheap labor to build the first transcontinental railroad across the United States. They were paid $25 to $30 a month, less than 30% of what white workers made. In the Rock Springs Massacre, 28 Chinese workers were murdered by white workers with no repercussions. Cases were dismissed because the judge couldn't find a law that prohibited the killing of Asian people. According to multiple state laws, only killing whites, blacks, and Mexicans was illegal. Some of the most racist things that have happened in history have been legal, and it doesn't make it okay. The Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 was the first law ever in the States restricting immigration based on race, banned Chinese for 10 years. The Geary Act of 1892 banned Chinese immigration for an additional 10 years and required Chinese residents to carry special documentation. Those caught without their special certificates were sentenced to hard labor or deportation, and bail was only an option if the accused was vouched for by a credible white witness. So even then, we had to learn to please those in power to try and survive and stay alive. In 1854, the Supreme Court ruled that the Chinese, like Blacks and Native Americans, were not allowed to testify in court, making it impossible for them to seek any justice or protection from the law. In the Tacoma riot of 1885, Tacoma, Washington's mayor declared the Chinese were a curse and a filthy, dirty horde. A November 1st deadline was declared with threats of violence and harm if it wasn't honored. Over 350 Chinese were chased by mobs, forced onto trains, their homes and their businesses burned down and destroyed. This organized action became known as the Tacoma Method, and it was taught as a way to forcibly remove Asian residents from cities throughout the United States. Filipino, South Asian, Chinese communities were run out of towns. There are so many instances of these riots by white mobs in Wyoming, California, Washington, Nevada. Most ended up in Chinatowns, a place of poverty and crime avoided by the police. Did you know that the largest mass lynching in American history happened in Los Angeles? In the Chinese massacre of 1871, 20 Chinese men and boys were hanged by a mob of over 500. There were no convictions. And then came Executive Order 9066 in 1942, when over 120,000 Japanese Americans were incarcerated in camps with armed guards and barbed wire for having the face of the enemy, despite having lived in America for generations. A common slogan was, "There's no yellow in the red, white, and blue." Asians weren't even allowed to become American citizens until 1943, and alien land laws prevented us from legally owning land in America until states slowly began allowing it. In 1949, Oregon and Montana, 1952, California, and in 2018, Florida voters finally passed an amendment to repeal the alien land law from their state constitution. Before 2018, multiple proposals to eliminate this law failed. In 1982, Chinese American Vincent Chen was beaten to death by a baseball bat in Detroit 11 days before his wedding by two white unemployed auto workers who mistook him for Japanese and blamed him for taking their jobs. They didn't go to jail. In 2020, COVID begins. Before this, there was SARS, and racism against Asians is permitted and encouraged by those in power who call it the Kung flu and China virus. An 89-year-old Chinese American woman was set on fire in New York. Another taking out her trash was attacked with acid. There were over 2,600 additional reported instances of hate crimes from March to August 2020 alone. 20 weeks, that's 130 a week. That's over 20 a day, and actual numbers are estimated to be so much higher. These are only those that are reported. Which brings us to now, 2021. Not sure if you're aware of it, but there's been a massive recent wave of unprovoked, racially motivated attacks. Just 3 days ago, there was an Asian man stabbed in the back with an 8-inch knife in New York City's Chinatown by a man who had attacked multiple other Asians. 4 days ago, an Asian woman was pepper sprayed walking on the street in Soho. Early this month, there was a 91-year-old shoved to the sidewalk and 2 other Asian elders slammed into the ground by the same attacker so hard they lost consciousness. This month, there was an 84-year-old Thai grandfather named Vijay Ratanapakti. He's an immigrant who moved to San Francisco to help care for his grandchildren. He was violently pushed while on his morning walk. He hit his head and he died from his injuries. Day after that, 64-year-old Vietnamese grandmother attacked in San Jose, Filipino-American man slashed in the face in the subway in New York. There are so many of these instances. If we do not know and learn from our history, we were doomed to repeat it. There's so much more, but right now, the more that I'm gonna share with you is my own personal grief, because beyond numbers, facts, and stories, there are people. I am here with you now, and I'm going to share my heart with you now. I invite you to hold sacred space by being present here with me, by feeling what you feel. As I feel it, I feel. My great-grandparents died of opium overdoses. My mother's parents met as orphan 9-year-old servants in a household that gave them food and shelter in exchange for their labor. My mother lost a brother and a sister because her family couldn't afford medicine to keep them alive. My grandparents worked as a truck driver delivering slop for pigs, a flower stand worker, and a janitor in a restaurant. They saved all they had so my father and my mother could come to America, young immigrants in a strange new country that wasn't built to help them. And they were met with judgment, fear, discrimination, contempt. I think of the sacrifices my ancestors made, the pain they suffered through in silence. They're trying to give their best to their children, as all parents do, a better life than they had. And it breaks my heart to see videos of elders who look like my father, my mother, and my grandparents, who walk the way they walk with their hands behind their backs, moving slowly as they stretch their tired muscles in their morning walks, quiet and keeping to themselves as they always have. Randomly attacked, set on fire, doused with acid, pushed to the ground, their soft, old, wrinkled bodies who have gone through so much, hitting the hard pavement because the features of their face and the shape of their eyes. My face, my eyes. I'm grieving the attacks because I feel them in my cells, the violence and the pain, the sacred rage and the deep, old sadness of all those who came before me. I'm grieving the shackles of silence that never kept us safe and only allowed others to keep hurting us. I'm grieving, staying quiet, sad, and scared when people called me a chink, told me my food made with love by my mom was disgusting and gross and smelled weird and dirty, asked where I'm really from, told to go back to my country when I was born in Indiana, told I'm not the leadership type because I don't speak up, while speaking over me when I tried, told I'm surprised you're not better at math, and you're cool for an Asian, and you need a white man to protect you, and told my community's suffering isn't as bad as others, not to take up space, as if compassion and kindness are a limited resource instead of an infinite well for all of us to draw from. I'm grieving being overlooked and selectively silenced in America's media and history books. I'm grieving being told it's our own fault for staying silent when silence is what kept us alive for so long. From those Chinese railroad workers accepting a fraction of the pay of a white worker to make barely enough to stay alive and then hunted and killed for existing, to the Filipino farm workers who stayed silent in horrible conditions, murdered for existing, and the first, second, third generation Japanese Americans who put their heads down and worked hard for the American dream only to have everything stripped away from them for having the face of the enemy. And now seeing and hearing about my Asian siblings being spit on, singled out, shouted at, given the stink eye, shoved and stabbed for once again having the face of the enemy, this virus, in danger for our lives and singled out as easy targets for looking the way we do. Staying silent has not kept us safe and will not keep us safe. I'm grieving, I'm angry, I'm tired, I'm heartbroken. Thank you for holding space for me, for sitting with me, and for seeing me. Before we move into things to do, I invite you to take a breath with me now in this moment to be as you are, with me as I am. What can you do if you're Asian? Take time to rest, slow down, take breaks from the news and social media. Give yourself permission to feel. When we're in survival mode, we can respond to stress by working harder, doing more, producing, and keeping ourselves really busy as a way to avoid discomfort. But what you're feeling can't be healed that way. Feelings in your heart, your body, your spirit, your cells need to be felt, need to be expressed, need to be honored, and need to be moved. They are not weaknesses, they are strength. Our feelings reveal to us what's important, what matters, and it keeps us connected to our humanity. We're all at different stages of our journeys of racial identity, courage and comfort in speaking up publicly or privately, and processing rage and grief. Wherever you are now, it's okay. Know you are seen, loved, and accepted as you are now and in every moment. Please know that you matter. Please know it's okay and important for you to take up space. We're all in this together, and our safety and collective liberation depends on our own healing, self and community care, and solidarity together. Reach out to connect. We're here for you, and we're here with you. Consider therapy. Perhaps the first one, your entire family, which is an incredible privilege in and of itself to be the first in your lineage to do the work to not just survive, but to thrive. Remember that you are your ancestors' greatest dream. The healing work that you do heals not only yourself, but generations before and after you. As you heal, we all heal. What can you do if you're not Asian? For my Black and brown siblings, know I am forever committed to being in this work alongside you. I know we can't move forward if anyone's left behind. There's a need for awareness, accountability, collaboration, healing amongst all our communities. And I hold a deep belief and knowing that there is space for all of us, that none of us will have to shrink to help all of us shine. Let's use our creativity to imagine new possibilities, new systems, and new ways to work and collaborate to create for the healing of all. What would it look like, feel like, and be like for all of us to feel safe and to thrive together? For my white friends, I ask that you continue to listen as you are now, learn as you are now, feel as you are now. I invite you to tap into your unique gifts and abilities to share what you've learned in the spaces and systems that you can touch. Ask yourself if you're including Asians in your decision-making, awareness, anti-racism work, your caring, your empathy. I invite you to continue your own journey of healing in your communities, to not allow racism to stay covert, indirect, subtle, and overlooked. May you have the courage to face it with each other. Tell the person telling the racist joke that it isn't funny. Speak up for the Asian person who's being harassed. Check on them afterwards to see if they need help or someone help walk them to their next destination. If you're a teacher, what are you including in your teaching? If you're an employer, what resources can you provide to support your Asian employees and customers? You can also watch Asian American shows that tell different stories and diversify your social media feeds to include Asian voices like Neck Shark. You can order from Asian restaurants and businesses. You can check on the Asian family in your neighborhood. You can reach out to your Asian friends and colleagues. You can ask them how they are, from your heart, not your head. You can listen. The world may tell you there isn't enough justice, caring, or opportunities for everyone, that we only have time and attention, ability to pay attention to one group of people at a time, and then we have to fight for that spot. None of that is true. What is true is that there is always more than enough for all of us. May we have the courage to see each other, to be with each other, and to heal, grieve, and grow together. This is how we build collective resilience. We need each other to make it through. So now if we have, I was going to invite you in a practice. I'll just demonstrate what it is really quickly. It's a somatic practice over 7,000 years old. You can do this seated or standing, and it's a Qigong exercise. I'll demonstrate. You can do this as you're listening, as you're watching, as you are being the rest of the time together. It can be done just really quickly. I'll demonstrate. Basically, it involves standing, and then you basically bounce up and down. Like you keep your back straight, your body loose, your hands loose, and you bounce up and down as you breathe. This helps shake and move. As human beings, we hold things in our body, and we need to move physically. So if you're sitting, if you want to stand and take a break to do that, you're welcome to do it. Thank you so much for being here with us today.
Ivy, thank you so much for bringing attention to racism and in these spaces against the Asian American community and casting a light on the grief held there. We unfortunately don't have any time for Q&A. We'll be moving on to the next speaker. But thank you so much, Ivy. Really appreciate you.